Hey guys, welcome back to Oak Abode. I have had so many requests to do a video about how I integrate my baby chicks with the grown-up flock, so that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to go through all the steps that I take to safely integrate some baby chicks with the older hens. Everything I'm going to talk about, I'll relink in a blog post below. So if you guys prefer to read instead of watch, you can just click the link in the description and that will take you to the notes from this whole video right on our website. It's really not too complicated of a process, but there are some key steps that I take to prevent injuries and disasters, which can absolutely happen if you're not careful when integrating chicks with older chickens. As always, I will link all the key items for this video in the description below. So the first things first is I never introduce brand new baby chicks to chickens. I usually do it when they're anywhere from 5 to 10 weeks old, depending on the weather. I will go into this a little bit more, but in the meantime, when they first come home, it's really important to make sure that they have a tiny baby chick friendly brooder. I did a whole separate video on how I raise my little baby chicks, which I will link for you guys below. One question I get a lot is how old should the chicks be when they take their first trips outside? Unfortunately, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to this question. I always recommend referring to the chick temperature charts, which I will link for you guys below. But basically, it all depends on your chick's age and the weather outside. So the warmer it is outside, the younger of an age your baby chicks can take their first field trips outdoors. I do always recommend making sure they're acclimated to trips outdoors before introducing them to the big girls. So I like to do this starting with 10 to 20 minute sessions, usually when they're around 3 to 4 weeks old. We do get our chicks later in the season, so it is usually warmer, which means that we can put them out at a younger age. However, if you're getting chicks early in the spring, you might have to wait until it's a little bit warmer outside, which means they might be a little bit older when you're able to take your chicks outside for the first time. As you guys can see, they absolutely love the outdoors. Now this is the setup that we use. These gates are so key for raising baby chicks. I'm gonna link the exact ones we use below, and I'm also gonna link these exact covers. We have tried so many things for taking chicks outside. These gates are absolutely the best thing that we have found, especially when they're older. We like to link 2 of them together so they have a little bit more room. You do want to make sure your chicks are big enough that they won't squeeze through the holes on the bottom, and if they are still small enough to do that, you might want to reinforce it with some chicken wire or some hardware cloth. But I've tried so many other methods, and these pens really are the best that we have found. This is not sponsored or anything, but we absolutely love them, so I linked them for you guys below. Well worth a little investment for a little more peace of mind. I do recommend the covers not only because they will jump out if you don't have the covers, but also because it's added protection against air predators. So over the next few weeks, we like to increase their time outside, which starts usually from 10 to 20 minutes outside to eventually, if the weather is permitting, they will spend the whole day outside. These pens really are not predator proof, so we definitely recommend bringing them in at night instead of depending on these pens. And of course, know your area. If you're in a predator heavy area, you might want to put them inside some heavier fencing as well. Once the chicks are old enough and the weather is permitting, again, check those chick temperature charts for reference. It's time to introduce them to the big girls because usually by this time, I am so tired of them sleeping inside and making a stinky mess. So the first thing I do is bring 1 or 2 of those pens over and I let everybody get acclimated through the fence. So as you can see, the chicks are generally pretty unfazed by this. In my experience, the hens tend to be very curious. So they will come over and they will check things out without there being any food involved. I actually recommend keeping the food and water out of the chick pen for their first meeting because a lot of times the older chickens will see the food and they will swarm on an even higher level. So for the first couple hours, I just have the chicks and the older hens meeting each other through the barrier without anything that will trigger them like food or even water. Of course, I keep a supervised eye on things as well. I know some people are going to get triggered that I like to take good care of the chickens and make sure everything goes well during these steps, but really it's so much easier to just get right from the beginning than to wait for a disaster to happen and have to try and go back and correct everything. As you can see, the chicks are pretty darn unfazed, and the big girls are able to satisfy their curiosity. One thing that I've noticed is if you know the pecking order of your flock, it seems to me that generally the chickens that are lower on the totem pole are actually the worst bullies to the babies. So I usually keep more of an eye on those chickens that get beat up by other chickens because they seem to want to really take it out on the little guys. I don't know how common that is, but that's just kind of an observation I've noticed over the years, which is a little bit interesting. Once everybody's acquainted a little bit, I do introduce the food and water into the chick pen. As you can see, this kind of re-hypes the interest of the older chickens. They love baby chick food, and really they just get jealous of anybody eating food that they can't have. Since the weather was warm enough, when it was bedtime, what I did was just move the chicks into the stall that the chickens use. Now, if you don't have a big stall like this, if you have a smaller coop, this might not be an option. In that case, what I would recommend is just continuing to move the chicks inside at night and then bringing them outdoors for a while until they're a little bit bigger. They can hold their own a little bit better with the big chickens. I know some people will also just set up a separate coop for the baby chicks. If you have the resources for that, that is also an option. At this stage, it's actually still pretty important to keep the chicks and the grown chickens somewhat separated because they're eating different kinds of food. The baby chicks are eating a much more rich diet and it's not gonna have extra calcium, and those big girls are gonna really want that extra tasty chick food. So what I do is I make sure that there's a setup where the chicks can get in and out, but the big chickens cannot quite get in and out. So this is easy with these pens that I linked below. Just prop the door open a little bit and then I tie the door and put a barricade up so they can't open or close anymore. This means that the chicks get full access to their food and water. Not only that, but they also have extra protection if they're getting bullied. They have a safe space that they can get away to where the big chicken cannot follow them all the way in. Again, I like to supervise for the first couple days as much as possible, but really it's amazing how quickly they figure out their area themselves. The next day, the chicks were really excited to get out and explore some more. As you can tell, they're totally unfazed by the big girls. They absolutely love pecking around and being outside. The more time that they spend with the big girls, the more likely there are to be some conflicts, especially as everybody establishes their pecking order. So I included a little bit of footage of that in a couple minutes here, but that's why I really recommend having, number one, lots of space for the big chickens. So you never want the big chickens to feel like their space is threatened or like they're becoming too crowded. I really encourage our chickens to free range and have as much space as possible. The other thing is that you don't want them to feel like they need to fight for resources. So that is why I make sure there's always a safe space for the chicks with their chick food and their chick water, and then they won't feel quite as tempted to take the big girl food either. It's important not to panic when you see everybody sorting out their pecking order. There will be some scuttles that go on. What's important is to make sure that none of the chicks are being bullied. Nobody starts bleeding. If that starts happening, you really need to take a few steps back and separate the chicks. And believe it or not, it's actually important to make sure that the little chicks aren't bullying any of the big hens either. Especially as they get bigger, a lot of people are surprised to find that the baby chicks end up being the bullies in the group. I always say the easiest way to prevent this is to make sure they get plenty of stimulation and plenty of space. From the time that the babies met the big girls for the first time to this shot that you see here of everybody free ranging happily together, it was all a matter of 2 to 3 days. These are the steps that I have found that work well for us. We've never had any bullying problems or any serious injuries between chickens, but if you have recommendations for what you like to do, make sure to leave a comment below so that everybody can learn from your experience as well. I think it actually really helps to have the little ones learn from the big ones because they quickly learn that as soon as the sun starts going down, it's time to head into the stall and get snuggled for the night. I didn't show it here, but the door actually kind of busted open at one point, and when I went to get them out in the morning, the chicks weren't sleeping in their pen. They were roosted happily with the big girls. Everybody was comfortable and safe, and that's when I knew we were all okay. Be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, and please leave a comment below with your experiences, tips, and tricks as well. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.